In a quiet, fall-covered village nestled deep within the mountains of Eastern Europe, there lies an abandoned shop with boarded-up windows and a faded sign that reads, "Verona's Dolls, beautiful companions for life." The building stands out like a decayed tooth amidst rows of modest homes, and the locals rarely speak of it. But if you ask the older residents, they might tell you about the legend of the Smiling Dollmaker, a tale so haunting that few dare to repeat it after nightfall. Years ago, when the shop was still open, it was run by a woman named Verona Novak, a skilled dollmaker known for her beautiful yet unnervingly realistic creations. Her dolls were sought after by collectors and parents from far and wide. Crafted from the finest porcelain, with eyes that seemed to follow you and expressions that carried a haunting lifelikeness, these dolls were works of art. But there was something about them that unsettled people. Verona's dolls always had an unmistakable smile on that didn't seem friendly or inviting, but rather knowing, as if they harbored a secret too dark to be spoken. The townsfolk admired her talent, but whispered behind her back. It was rumored that Verona was not just an artist, but a practitioner of the occult. Some said she could capture a piece of a person's soul and embed it into her dolls, which is why they looked so real. Others claimed that her dolls weren't just porcelain, but that they were made from something far more sinister. But these were just rumors, at least, until the disappearances began. The first disappearance, the first to vanish, was a little girl named Anya. She was a bright and joyful child who would often stop by Verona's shop on her way home from school, pressing her nose against the window to admire the dolls. One day, she didn't come home. Panic spread through the village. Her parents frantically searched for her, but no trace of Anya was ever found. The police questioned Verona, who smiled warmly and assured them she knew nothing. But the next day, a new doll appeared in Verona's window, a doll with bright blue eyes and blonde curls that looked hauntingly like little Anya. More children started to disappear, one after another. A young boy named Tomas, who loved to carve wooden toys, vanished while delivering a bundle of firewood to Verona's shop. The following day, a new doll was on display, a boy with a carved wooden toy clutched in its porcelain hands and an unsettling, white smile on its face. Then came Petra, the baker's daughter, who often brought bread to Verona in exchange for her kindness. Soon after, a doll with flour-dusted hands and bright red braids took its place in the shop window, its glass eyes staring blankly at those who dared to look. Whispers and warnings, fear gripped the village. Parents kept their children indoors, and the once busy street in front of Verona's shop grew silent. The mayor ordered Verona to close her shop and leave the village, but she only smiled. She agreed to shutter her shop, but she refused to leave, claiming that her work was her only purpose and that she had done nothing wrong. Still, the disappearances stopped for a while, and people began to relax. The children returned to play in the streets, and the village slowly came back to life. Verona's shop remained closed, and for a time, it seemed that the curse of the Smiling Dollmaker had been lifted. But the villagers still whispered, and those whispers grew darker when, one foggy autumn night, the dollmaker herself vanished. Verona's return, months passed, and the village tried to forget. But then, late one evening, just as the fog rolled in thick from the mountains, lights flickered on in the doll shop. Verona was back. She reopened her doors, and the dolls in the window seemed to have changed. Their smiles were wider, their eyes somehow more piercing. People who passed by the shop reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the dolls were watching them, mocking them. Yet, curiosity, as it often does, got the better of a few villagers, and some dared to enter Verona's shop to see if the rumors were true. The shop was exactly as they remembered, rows upon rows of dolls, each more lifelike than the last, each with that unnerving, knowing smile. Verona herself seemed unchanged, her grey hair neatly tied back, her eyes cold, but with a perpetual smile that mirrored her dolls. She welcomed visitors, offering tea and inviting them to look around. The few who entered never stayed long. They spoke of feeling the walls close in around them, of hearing faint whispers from the dolls when Verona wasn't looking. One visitor, a local carpenter named Gregor, even swore he saw a doll blink, but he laughed it off, saying it must have been a trick of the light, a dark invitation. It wasn't long after Verona's return that the disappearances began again. This time, it wasn't just children, it was adults too. Gregor, the carpenter, was one of the first to go missing. He had been working late in his shop one night when he claimed to hear a soft, melodic voice calling his name. His wife found the door to his workshop wide open, his tools scattered, but there was no sign of him. The next day, a new doll appeared in Verona's window. It wore a tiny apron, and its hands were painted to resemble rough, work-worn skin. Its smile was wider than the others, its eyes even more lifelike. One by one, others vanished: a seamstress, a schoolteacher, a farmer. Each time, a new doll would appear in Verona's window, and each time, it would bear an unsettling resemblance to the missing person, their features captured with terrifying accuracy. But it wasn't just the resemblance that sent chills through the villagers, it was the expressions. The dolls seemed to smile wider and wider, almost as if they were pleased with their new existence. The night of the dolls, one night, as the fog rolled in thicker than ever, a small group of villagers, led by the local priest, decided to confront Verona once and for all. They armed themselves with torches and tools and marched to her shop, determined to put an end to her wickedness. When they arrived, they found the door ajar and a strange, low hum emanating from inside. The shop was dark, save for a single flickering candle in the back room. The priest stepped forward, calling out to Verona, demanding she show herself. When there was no answer, the group cautiously entered. The moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them, and the candle went out. Panic set in as they fumbled in the darkness, and that's when they heard it: the soft, rhythmic tapping of porcelain against wood, like hundreds of tiny feet moving all at once. As their eyes adjusted, they realized the dolls were moving. Slowly, methodically, they were turning their heads, their glassy eyes now glowing with a faint, unnatural light. The dolls' smiles grew impossibly wide, their mouths opening just enough to reveal tiny, sharp teeth. Then, in unison, they began to whisper a chorus of voices, some familiar, others unrecognizable. They whispered names, secrets, fierce things only the villagers would know. The group froze, paralyzed by terror, as the dolls began to climb down from their shelves, moving closer. The priest tried to shout a prayer, but his voice was drowned out by the rising whispers. He raised his torch, but before he could act, it was snuffed out, plunging the room into darkness. The last thing he saw was Verona standing in the doorway, her smile wider than ever, her eyes filled with a cold, unfeeling delight. The aftermath: when morning came, the shop was empty. The group of villagers who had entered the night before was never seen again. The townsfolk, terrified and broken, boarded up the shop and declared it cursed. No one dared to go near it again, and with time, the legend of the Smiling Dollmaker grew. It said that on foggy nights, if you stand outside Verona's shop and listen closely, you can still hear the faint whispers of the dolls and see their glowing eyes watching from the cracks in the boards. Some say that the dolls still move, still whisper, waiting for their next visitor. Others believe that Verona's spirit remains in the shop, forever crafting her dolls, each one more lifelike than the last, each one smiling just a little wider. And they say that if you listen long enough, you might hear her voice among the whispers, inviting you in, promising you a beautiful new companion for life. To this day, no one knows what became of Verona Novak or if she was ever truly human, but the dolls remain, eternally smiling, eternally waiting for the next soul, foolish enough to enter their domain. And so, the legend of the Smiling Dollmaker lives on, an eternal reminder that not all art is meant to be admired, and that some creations are best left undisturbed.